not through gills. Now there are different kinds of reptiles, okay, and in a few groups. There's crocodilians, which includes all the crocodiles, alligators, caiman, gharials. There's turtles and tortoises. There's lizards. There's a group called the amphisbaenians. There are snakes and the tuatara. So the tuatara is just two species of a very, very prehistoric animal. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But as far as crocodilians go, there's five basic kinds of crocodilians. So crocodilians is slightly different from crocodiles. So within crocodilians, there are some animals that are what we call true crocodiles, like our Indian freshwater crocodile, like the Nile crocodile that you might have seen on TV quite often, like the saltwater crocodile. And then there are alligators that we all have heard of. There's the false gharial, the Indian gharial, which is a very, very unique animal, and all kinds of caiman, so which are found in Central and South America. And then possibly the most adorable of all reptiles could be the turtles and tortoises. But they grow from some of the tiniest turtles that would just fit in your hand to giant leatherback turtles that are over 7 feet long and could weigh a ton. They're also amongst the oldest animals in the longest living animals rather. So tortoises, the Galapagos tortoises are known to live over 100 years. And many other species also live close to 100 years. And they're found in all kinds of places, through almost on every continent except Antarctica, and they are quite. If you share my taste in animals, then they're very cute and adorable. Not necessarily cuddly though. Then we get to lizards, which are the most abundant of all reptiles and the most diverse. There's I think somewhere near 8,000 or 9,000 different kinds of lizards across the world. So and everywhere you go in India, you'll see some lizard or the other. It could be a house gecko, it could be a monitor lizard, and lizards range from really tiny dwarf chameleons, which are just a little over an inch long, just about that big, to the mighty Komodo dragon, which grows to 10 feet. So they're again a huge diversity, and there are all kinds of adaptations from being able to walk on glass walls to be able to swing from their tails, to have eyes that go in different directions, to changing color. So they're a very, very interesting group of animals, and they feed on everything from submarine algae and mosses and vegetation to buffaloes. So they're a very, very interesting group of reptiles. Now, amphisbaenians are a very, very interesting group of animals. They are reptiles. They look very much like worms, and they are quite closely related to what we call true lizards. Uh, but they're not legless lizards either. There are also legless lizards who've slowly lost their limbs. But these amphisbaenians are a unique group, and they're very interesting in as much as no one knows all that much about them. Uh, and they live underground mostly. So they're probably a group of reptiles that also evolved the same way snakes started to evolve. And then there's our oldest reptile is the tuatara, and it's been around for a couple of 100 million years now. And they're found on the islands of New Zealand, and they're very, very endangered now because of the introduction of a few animals from other places like the possum and some rats. So tuataras, I think, known to have been around from around 240 to 250 million years ago, same time as crocodiles first showed up, and they have a very interesting dentition, which is unlike most other reptiles. They also have what is commonly called a third eye on their forehead, but on top of their head rather, and it's not a full blown eye, but it can sense light very well, and it helps them to find the right place to thermoregulate and things like that. A few other reptiles also have a similar sense, but they're not as pronounced as the tuatara. And then we get to my personal favorite of all the reptiles, in fact, of all animals, quite honestly, snakes. And snakes are, well, I guess amongst the vertebrates, they might be the most alien of all animals that we have. They're most different from us. They have no limbs. They can't shut their eyes. They can't really hear sounds like us. They keep sticking their tongue out, not at not at anything, but for things. But we'll speak about that in just a minute. But like reptiles, they all have watertight skins. They have scaly skins, and most of us would have seen. Thumbs up if you've seen the shed skin of a snake. Yeah, so they all shed their skin. You can do a thumbs up or thumbs down for yes or no. Do we shed our skin? Very good. That's usually a skin. You guys have all got it for Shonali. So, but yeah, we do shed our skin. We just shed our skin in very small pieces. We shed our skin, because we have our arms, we have sweat pores and other holes in our skin. So we can't really have this nice, beautiful, long shed skin and come out looking fresh each time we shed our skin, which snakes do. They look really gorgeous after they shed their skin. And all snakes lay eggs, or they carry their eggs inside them, and they sort of lay them when they're ready to hatch. And I'll show you some of that in just a bit. Now, snakes sort of smell with their tongues, but I'm going to show you a video now that will sort of explain it a little better, okay? Watch this video. So this is a common Indian crate, and that's in super slow motion. And you can see how it stuck its tongue out. It felt the surface in front of it. It's also picking up particles from the air, so it can pick up water particles, any scents that are in the air, any particles that are on the surface in front of it, and it's going to do it one more time. But this is the problem with super slow motion. You need to wait. There we go. Is it takes the particles that it gets on the tip of its very sticky forked tongue, and it sticks that tongue into can you see where that vomeronasal organ is? Thumbs up if you can, thumbs down if you can't. Yeah, so the vomeronasal organ is like a super strong taste bud, and it can sense anything, including water vapor. So technically, snakes can smell water, and the sense of smell helps them navigate their world really, really well. But we also have a vomeronasal organ, but we haven't used it in a long time, which is a good thing, because otherwise we'd go around making really strange, faces. We'd have to go like all the time, and that would be really weird. You might have seen a horse or a goat or a video of a lion or even a cat do that, where they'll face the wind, and then they'll lift their upper lip and they'll breathe in deeply, and that's them trying to get the smells to their vomeronasal organ, and that helps them identify smells. So although it could be quite, if ours still worked, it could be quite interesting just from the point of view of expression and communication. And maybe if we go around making funny faces, we'll get a vomeronasal organ function back. So you guys should try it for the next 24 hours. But this is a corn snake, and this is how a snake lays eggs, all right? So the eggs are coming out of an opening called the cloaca, and it's at the base of the tail, and the eggs have been fertilized and have been developing inside the body for probably around now, which is the latest, will be about 23 to 24 days. And now they'll come out, and she lays a bunch of them. So those markings on top are so that the egg, so you can see this, right? I'm just supposed to, you can see all the capillaries and everything the blood vessels forming, and you can see that little blackish ring on the top right corner, right? So that's called the embryonic well, and that's where the embryo is going to develop. And the black marks on top that have been made with a marker are to ensure that that egg stays upright with the right side up throughout its incubation. And so no one should ever turn it off turn it over, because if that happens, then the embryo can break off and then it will die inside. So there have to be these are not hard eggs like bird eggs or turtle or crocodile eggs even. These are soft shelled eggs, and they need to be treated very, very carefully. And unless, of course, you want an omelette, then it's different. Whether you see them, so they have a little egg tooth on their lip when they just born, and they slash it inside, and that's called pipping, and then they pip out. And I think pipping is the perfectly cute word for a perfectly cute phenomenon, where they'll stick their heads out, and sometimes they'll just stay there, taking their first breaths, and they'll absorb the rest of the yolk, and then emerge from the eggs. And once they emerge from the eggs, sometimes as soon as a couple of hours after, and sometimes as long as 3 or 4 days later, they will shed their first skin and then begin their having to find their own food, having to do everything from the time they're born. They're on their own. And some snakes, like I said, give birth to live young, but that's because they've collected they've held the eggs inside their bodies for the entire incubation. This is a boa, and it's just, you see it's going to from the cloaca. That's basically it laying its eggs, but the young are already ready to hatch. So they don't need the outer covering. They just have a little sac that they're born inside. So they look like little sacks of goop that they'll then break their heads out of. There you go. And he'll stick his head out. Not the most graceful of birds, but it works. In fact, there are some snakes, like our Indian vine snake, which is the tree snake, and it gives birth to live young. And although we believe that the mothers must come lower to the ground before they give birth, I've actually seen one give birth once, and it was about 6 feet off the ground. And these little babies were just being born and going flop onto the ground, and then starting their lives. So not even the most ceremonious of births. Now in India, we have over 340 species, and this has changed a lot. So about 20 years ago, my mentor Rom Whitaker and another phenomenal herpetologist named Ashok Captain wrote a book called the Field Guide to the Snakes of India. And at that time, we had 285 species or something like that. So we've gone up by, do the math, 55 species in 20 years. But most of those have come about in the last about 8 or 9 years. So, and there are still more being found all the time. There are new species, not in just the far reaches of the northeast or in places like the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, but around Bangalore, just outside Nagpur. So there are places where there's a lot of, it's just that we haven't done enough research. And as we do more research, we're going to find a lot more species. Now, globally, the world only has about 3,500 known species of snakes. So we are already at we have about 10% of the total number of species, which is a really, really good thing. It's not the highest diversity, but it's definitely up there. I think Mexico has the highest diversity of snakes. So I think the game is on. We better beat them soon. But out of these 340 or so species, there's only about 50 or so that can do significant damage to us. So means that, if they bite us, then, as a human, we could either have, get damaged badly, get hurt badly, or we could even die. But just because they can doesn't mean that they do. And out of those 50 or so significantly venomous snakes, there are only 15 to 18 species in the country that are what we call medically significant. And that means that the venom can affect us, and bites do happen, and people do get affected by their bites. So, and we'll talk about some of them in a bit. And it varies in different parts of the country. There are different species that are medically significant. They're also not only found in wild areas. Very often, especially in cities and towns nowadays, people will, if you see a snake in your house, people say, why is the snake come here? And the thing is, the snake has not come there; it lives there as well. Uh, and as far as our house or our society or our building block or anything, uh, none of the snakes have ever signed on any ownership deal. So it's only humans who have this sense of ownership. For every other animal, it is just space. So if a snake comes into our house, we should actually think of it as a compliment, because they've come there because they find it comfortable, or they found a nice place to think, or not so much of a compliment if they found rats there. So very often they might also come there for food. So we'll talk about how to cut down the problems that we might have with snakes in a while, but snakes are around us everywhere. Everywhere we go. And some species, like spectacled cobras, like rat snakes, like checkered keelbacks, they really like us. And unfortunately, they like our filth more than they like us. So having sewers and lots of garbage and all these things actually makes it really good for them. It's sort of like crows and pigeons that wouldn't be so common in wild areas or in pristine nature. But when they're in towns and cities and villages, they do much better because there's so much garbage, there's so much food, and there's fewer predators and hardly any competition. So they called they used to be called weed species. Now they're called commensal species, and it means these are species that do well around humans. Let's look at some record holders. Oh, I shouldn't give this away first, right? Oh, I gave the answers away. I hope no one is looking at this.
That's what I wanted to say. Whenever you want to launch a question, just let us know. We'll do that.
Cool. All right. The problem is I just get carried away with my own voice. So I'll do. So, but who can tell me which is the longest snake in the world? Can you put the answers in?
A lot of them are saying cobras.
Okay.
So we're getting reticulated python, anaconda, cobra.
Okay. All right. So actually, quite fortunately, cobras are not the longest snake in the world. That would be a bit of a problem, because if they were the longest snakes in the world, then we would also be their food, because cobras eat anything. So, but the longest snake in the world is actually, oh wow, there's a lot of answers suddenly coming in. Okay, the longest snake in the world is actually the reticulated python. So whoever answered that, congratulations. That's the right answer. And can anyone guess how long it's been recorded at? What length has it been recorded to?
People are saying 30 feet, 10 feet, 12 meters, 10 meters.
Okay. So 30 feet is the closest to it. There is one record of a reticulated python that was supposed to be 33 feet long, but we don't have that specimen. And for a long time, there was a reward out. for any snake that could be found that was over 30 feet. And for, I think, almost 100 years, it wasn't claimed. But there have been records of reticulated pythons of 27-ish feet since. But every now and then, you'll see a report of someone saying that they've captured a snake that is 35 or 40 feet. A few years ago, there was one that they said was 49 feet long. But of course, when people actually went to measure it, it was something like 24 or 25 feet long, which is still very big. Okay. But the thing is, the reticulatus is the longest, but when you say anaconda, it is definitely the largest snake. It's not short either. It's known to have grown to about 24 feet, but a 24-foot anaconda would be, 3 or 4 feet to over a meter in width. So that's a huge, huge snake. And in contrast to that, the other end of the spectrum are the tiny little worm snakes or thread snakes that are thinner than a pencil lead, not your click pencil lead, but an actual pencil lead, and they just grow to a few inches, a few centimeters long. And interestingly, the ones at least here in India and other parts of Asia, there's one called the Brahmini worm snake, and so the Brahmini worm snake and its close relatives feed a lot on ants and ants' eggs. Now, the interesting thing about these is they're the only snakes in the world that choose to eat their prey from the bum side first. Everything else takes the head in first. And the reason they choose to eat their prey from the back forward is because ants' heads are so difficult to digest that they eat the abdomen and the thorax and then they snip off the head so they don't have to digest it at all. So it's and the other interesting thing is there are no male worm snakes. They're all females. And whoever can tell me the word for what that is when you don't need a male and a female to reproduce, there is a word for that. And can anyone tell me what the snake on the right holds a record for? Can you put it in the chat, I think?
Yes, so I think we are getting a lot of answers in the chat box. We're getting asexual reproduction. We are getting pathogenesis.
Yes.
Yes.
Parthenogenesis is correct. All right. And the snake on the right holds the record for being?
A lot of people are saying the largest venomous snake in the world. Is it correct,
Yes.
Jerry?
Yes. The longest venomous snake in the world, and that's the king cobra. So, and this is actually our king cobra who we have here. His name is Aragorn, named after the king from the Lord of the Rings. Not to be confused with the dragon rider. We're going to talk now about some of the common snakes around us. Now, if you're from all over the country, so there are going to be a lot of different snakes as well. So these are snakes that are more around where I live, which is in South India and Karnataka. But hopefully I'll cover some that are near you as well. So these 4 species for the longest time were called the big 4 venomous snakes, and they were thought to be the only snakes that were medically significant in the country for a very long time. And then for some time they were thought to be the most medically significant snakes as well, which is true for some parts of the country, but it's not true for all parts of the country. So this is true in places like Maharashtra, some parts of Madhya Pradesh, most parts of central India. But as you move to other parts, if you go towards even Rajasthan and Punjab, and if you go further up into the Himalayas, and certainly in the northeast or the Western Ghats or the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, there's a lot of other species that are also medically significant. Now, the snake on the top left of your screen is the Russell's viper. And where I live, it's the one that's most involved in human-snake conflict, where people get bitten, and unfortunately, it gets killed a lot as well. So it's a big problem, and so it's got a very problematic venom as well, and one that's not so easy to treat. And then very often, even if the person is saved, which happens quite regularly, there is a lot of damage to the place that the snake bite was. So that causes a lot of long-term trouble for the people as well. Then there is the spectacle cobra on the right, which is possibly the most famous snake in the world. In fact, whenever someone says snake in most parts, the immediate symbol is the hooded thing that you put your hand up and you go, oh, that's a snake. Even that's what we when we're doing snake, we put our hands up. Now, sadly, a hooded up cobra is actually not a normal cobra. A hooded up cobra is actually quite nervous and it's usually quite scared and stressed and traumatized. So seeing a cobra just do what it does normally is actually much nicer than having it hooded up here like this. At the bottom left is a saw-scaled viper. It's the smallest of the big four, and it's called a saw-scaled viper because on the side of its body, it's got these little the scales are not arranged flat like this, but sort of, can you see my hands up like this? And they rub against each other. They've got a keel type of rough thing, and they rub against each other, and they make a small sawing sort of sound. So it's called the saw-scaled viper. And then on the right, bottom right, is a krait. They and I'm only calling it a krait. They used to be called the common Indian krait, but now there's about 2 or 3 species that are going to be described soon. That this so-called common Indian krait is what's called a species complex, which means there's more than one species within it, which is very interesting for someone like me, but is a big problem when it comes to things like snakebite. So we're probably going to we found one more, I think, in another couple of regions around Karnataka itself. We might find another species as well. Now, as far as snake adaptations goes, all 3 of these species are a group of snakes called pit vipers. And pit vipers are found in Asia, in North and South America as well. And they're very interesting because they have these heat sensing pits. So if you see the snake on the left with the black background, right, the green snake with the black background, that is a bamboo pit viper. Now you can see the eye, and then in front of the eye, there's a large sort of hole. And then in front of that, just behind the tongue, there's a small hole. Now that small hole is the nostril, and the large hole is what's called the heat sensing pit. And they're able to see in infrared. So it's sort of like you might have seen in videos or something where different temperatures have different colors. So colder temperatures will be blue, almost black sometimes, and then warmer will go to orange, and then yellow, and then eventually white, which is the hottest. So they can actually see that, and some pit vipers can actually tell the difference of 0.02 degrees centigrade, which is like a military type of heat sensing. And they do that so that they can actually capture their prey or stay safe from predators in complete darkness. Most of them actually are more active at night. On the left is a vine snake, and vine snakes are quite common in most parts that there is vegetation. There's a few different species of green vine snake, but all of them have a similar shape, and they have this long, pointed snout. And unfortunately for them, people have seen that snout and believe that they use that snout to either drill a hole in your head or poke your eyes out or anything like that. The funny part is most of these animals evolved before humans were even around. So they don't evolve or have things based on us. In fact, most of them don't want to have anything to do with us. They only want to have stuff to do with our filth and the rats that we generate and the garbage that they can hide in. But that long snout is so delicate that if it tried to poke our eyes out with it, it would break. But what it is there for is to help it, one, camouflage and makes it look more like a vine, but it also helps it. You can see how its eyes, the pupils are sort of horizontal, and you can see they're sort of pointing forward like this, and they are aligned along that ridge to the tip of the snout. And that enables this snake to see one single image. Other snakes have their eyes on 2 sides of their heads, and that gives them 2 different images that they have to process. And just like us, if we close one eye, it's hard for us to aim and for us to be able to judge distances. With these 2 eyes together, this one gets a single image, giving it what as good a binocular vision as they can hope for, and is able to judge distances and aim really well. On the top right is a snake called the cat snake, and no points for anyone who guesses why it's called a cat snake, because that eye is so it's so obvious that it's got an eye that looks like a cat's eye. And cat snakes are a group of snakes that, amongst a group of snakes that are rear fanged, just like the vine snake as well. And they have venom, but most of them are not dangerous to humans. But some of them, even with rear fangs, can be dangerous to humans. The cat snake is not. And at the bottom is a bronzeback tree snake, which is a super fast. It's like the Hussein Bolt of the snake kingdom. They're so fast that you can see them for a second. You can have your eyes on them, and then they could be gone. They're completely harmless, and they live in trees, and they basically feed on lizards and sometimes very small birds and things like that, but mostly lizards. And they are quite a spectacle. They used to be very common even in places like Bangalore. They're still very common in Chennai, in fact, especially wherever there's gardens and things like that, and around the outskirts as well. Now, all three species here are kinds of wolf snakes. They're completely harmless snakes to us. They're called wolf snakes because in the front of their mouth, they've got large teeth. They're not fangs. They don't inject any venom, but they have large teeth, and those teeth help them grab hold of geckos, and that's their primary source of food. Wolf snakes love geckos, and they live in similar places to geckos as well. They live in rock crevices, old walls, tiled roofs, and they're a great snake to have around. There's now many more species than we thought earlier. In fact, the one on the top right used to be called the common wolf snake. It's now been split up into about 5 or 6 different species in different parts of the country as well. Now, I'm hoping that many of you would have seen a rat snake at some point or the other of your life, because they are just awesome snakes to have, to see, to watch. They can be quite entertaining. They do all kinds of acrobatics, trying to get to strange places to get food. I've seen a rat snake trying to sort of hold itself up by one half of the body and try to reach far inside a cave to try and grab a bat. It was very awkward. It didn't make it. I've seen another one try to get. Actually, I've seen this a few times where a rat snake was trying to get into, the nest of a weaver bird. So the nest of a weaver bird, I've seen rat snakes trying to get into it, and I've actually seen a rat snake get into one of those, but there was no grace involved in that at all. It was very clumsy and it fell all over the place, but it got its paycheck, and it was able to eat the babies that were inside. But also quite often in places where there are rat snakes, every year during the breeding season, you see that the picture on the left, that's 2 rat snakes doing what's called male combat. And it happens during the breeding season where males will combat for the right to mate with the female. And the stronger one wins. They don't bite each other or anything. They just do this wrestling thing where they twine around each other and one pushes the other one down. Now, rat snakes are an amazing animal to have around for various reasons, not just because they're so wonderful and entertaining, also because they are non-venomous. They're quite a large snake. They are gluttons. They eat a lot. So they'll take care of rats. And because they're eating so much, they compete with other snakes. So other snakes that could be venomous snakes like cobras or Russell's vipers will have less to eat. Also, rat snakes are known to feed on the young of cobras and Russell's vipers. And it's if there's ever a rat snake in your compound or anything, it's best to just let it be there, because this is a snake that, even if it wanted to, cannot do any harm to you. It can do as much harm as a rose could do to you with the thorns that a rose has. So, and I think they're prettier than roses too. Now, all these are rear fang snakes, and they're all part of a group of snakes called keelbacks. The one on the top left is called a green keelback, and it's a very interesting species. It's very closely related to a snake that's found in the Far East near Japan called the tiger keelback. And the tiger keelback is the only snake that is known to be both venomous and poisonous. Does everyone know the difference between a venom and a poison? So let me give you, so venom, so a poison is anything. It could be injected, it could be swallowed, it could be inhaled, it could go through your skin, and it's a toxin that will affect you. A venom is only produced in an animal, and it's a protein, and it has to be injected into its victim for it to take effect. So the green keelback, like the tiger keelback in the Far East, is a toad specialist. They feed almost exclusively on toads. And toads have these things called parotid glands on their backs. So if an animal like a dog or anything else bites a toad, that it releases this toxin into the mouth, which makes it makes the animal froth and retch and feel nauseous and everything. So the animal immediately lets it go. Now, the tiger keelback feeds on toads, and it's got rear fangs, so its venom works on toads. And what it does is it's able to take the toxin, the toad toxin, which is called the bufotoxin, and it's able to do what's called sequestration and keep it in the nuchal gland. The nuchal gland is, see where that yellow patch is on the green keelback? That's where the nuchal gland is, just under the skin. Now, the tiger keelback is known to, it's been studied, and we know that it actually is able to do the same thing, and it sort of, if it's attacked by a predator, it'll present the back of its neck and it'll get bitten there, and the same thing happens to the predator. The green keelback also does that, but we don't know if it actually sequesters the toxin. So that's some research that we need to do. So all of you, get jobs and answer these questions, okay? All right. The one on the top right is a buff striped keelback. They're very, very common in grassy areas and gardens in most parts of the country, and they're completely harmless. They, in fact, most often don't even bite. In fact, this is one of the first snakes that I ever picked up, and fortunately, it was a buff striped keelback because otherwise, just because of natural selection, I wouldn't be here. And now the bottom left is a St. John's keelback. Okay, it's found in northeast India. It looks a lot like the checkered keelback, which is one of the most common snakes around the country. The checkered keelback water snake. This one looks a lot like that, except that it has smooth scales compared to the checkered keelback, which has much more keel scales. And this little jewel at the bottom right is a hill keelback. And the hill keelback it's going to change its color as it grows, and it's going to get more brown with it won't be so brightly colored. And when things change from when they're babies to as they grow through their life, that's called an ontogenic change. And there are some things in some species that they change so much that it's called ontogenic variation. Now we get to some of the one of the big snakes in the country. In India, we have 3 species of pythons. We do have the reticulated python known from the Nicobars, and it's recently been reported in Mizoram, and they found quite a few specimens of it as well. So we have them in the northeast and in the Nicobar Islands. We have the Burmese python, which is found in the far north and parts of the northeast. And then we have this one, which is the Indian rock python. Now, the Indian rock python grows to about 15 or 16 feet and sometimes gets a little bigger, but it's not one of the 4 giant snakes in the world. The 4 giant snakes in the world are the reticulated python, which is the longest, the anaconda, which is the largest, the African rock python, which grows to about 22 feet now, but is quite slender, and then the Burmese python, which grows to a little over 20 feet. And then we have this wonderful snake. Now, Indian rock pythons and Burmese pythons love being around water. Most large snakes, in fact, love being around water because it helps them stay buoyant. Moving on the ground takes a lot of effort, but when they're in water, they just move really, they can move very fast and very gracefully as well. On the top right, we have the rough-scaled sand boa. It's common through most of mainland India except the northeast and the western Ghats, and it lives just under the surface of the soil. And like the red sand boa that is under it, below it, when they're about to hunt, they wait just under the surface of the soil, and they wait for an animal like a rodent or a ground nest, a ground feeding bird to go past or on it, and they sort of snap shut and grab hold of the thing really fast. And it's quite, if it's dry and it's sandy, it's quite dramatic because this puff of dust flies out, and then you'll see this snake with its prey in its mouth and its coils. Now, there is a lot of trouble with snakes and snake bite in the country, and that's because we have a very large population of people who are agriculturists and need to work in the fields with their hands, and are most often barefooted and things like that. But it's the most important thing to remember is that a snake could be anywhere. And another very important thing to remember is that a snake does not want to bite us. Okay? They just want to get away, they want to hide. They bite us when we step on them, and it's always an accident. So just as we would look before we cross the road, we need to be vigilant and aware of ourselves and our surroundings to be safe when anywhere in the tropics, really, because there are snakes everywhere in the tropics. Okay? One of the most important things is to keep our surroundings clean. Having rubbish will always make a great room for snakes to live in. So the way we live in our cities and towns and villages is we actually make things great for some species of snakes, and then very often people have a problem with them there. So it's like offering people free stay with home delivery and everything they need, and then saying we don't like the fact that you live here. Also, while you're landscaping, if you like gardening and things like that, try to grow things that will not create too much of cover on the ground. Higher up is usually fine because one, you can see it, and two, the biggest problems with snakes are the snakes that hide and that are on the ground more. So if we can avoid those snakes being around, or at least avoid those snakes being around where we are frequently walking or playing, then we're a lot safer. And don't talk to your children about snakes, but this is a slide from a presentation that I give to everyone. But children, remember, if you are playing and if the ball goes into a bush, don't run after it. Always check. If you're playing, if you have a place that you play regularly and there are bushes and all around, keep a stick there so that whenever a ball goes there, you can check, or you can just retrieve the ball with a stick. All right. And if you do see a snake, just call an adult. Okay. You can stand at a distance and watch it. Don't interfere with it or anything, but call an adult. Now, in case of snake bite, and if something were to happen ever, it's very important to stay calm. And then, because many snakes actually cause swelling, it's important to remove anything that might become tight if there is swelling. So a watch, a ring, a friendship band. If you're wearing long sleeve shirts, remove the cuff button, bangles, anything that might become tight. You just remove that, and then you immobilize the limb. Okay. If it's on the hand, you find someone's scarf, you find a towel, a dupatta, a shawl, and you make a nice broad sling. Okay, you don't tie anything around the bitten limb, just a nice broad sling, and then you try and keep the arm below the heart. If it's on the leg, try and carry the patient. If you can't carry the patient, support them so that they don't have to put just on your shoulder with their arm around your shoulder, so they don't have to put weight on their feet, on the foot of the leg that's bitten. And then get to a vehicle as soon as possible and get to a hospital as soon as is safely possible. If you see anything change, you note the symptoms, and then you tell the doctor and it's really important that you do all this promptly. So the doctor doesn't need to know that you were coming back from lunch, or you were going to go see a movie, or you just finished whatever class. You just tell the doctor that so-and-so was bitten on which part of the body by a snake at so-and-so time. And then at so-and-so time, I noticed that some discoloration happened or the swelling got too much. Any of those things, and the doctor will take it from there. It's important not to worry about it, but it's important to also get to hospital promptly. More importantly than what to do is what not to do. Okay, is you never ever try and tie anything around the bitten limb, and this is because so if you like me, then in class I always did other things. So have you ever wrapped a rubber band around your finger because you were just fidgeting in class? Yes, I have a community here. Yes, all right, okay. So, and when you tie the rubber band, you know that you feel that throbbing behind it, right? And that throbbing is because your heart is still pumping blood. So blood might not be going as well to the heart, but it's still being pumped from the heart, and that's creating a lot of pressure. Now, to treat the venom, you need to have antivenom actually reach the venom, and that antivenom is sort of neutralizes the venom molecules. Okay, so for that you have to take off that whatever you've tied, and just as when you take off that rubber band, the blood flows really fast. Blood will flow much faster, and that leads to a sudden spread of venom, which is much worse than this venom spreading normally through your blood. So never tie anything. Don't panic, which is sort of like me just repeating, stay calm. But panic, I mean, there's terrible things. It makes your heart beat faster. It also makes us make bad decisions. So if you feel like you're getting into a bit of a frenzy, take a minute, take a few slow breaths, calm down, and then start again. Okay? Panic is the worst thing that you could let set in. You never try to suck out the venom from the wound. For two reasons. One, you can't. If I take a drop of ink and I put it in a glass of water, can I suck the ink out? Can I suck the ink out? I can see laughter, but I don't see anything else.
A lot of no's.
A lot of no's. Okay, cool. All right. Okay. So
we also have a lot of questions, Jerry. Lots
okay.
of questions.
Then we'll get to that. I think this is the last slide, so we'll just get to that after this. And that's a simple physical reaction of diffusion. When venom is in the bloodstream, it is actually binding with molecules, so you can't suck it out. Plus, if you suck it out, you might actually cause the small blood vessels to rupture, and that would release it more into the bloodstream. So you never do that. You don't wash the wound because that also involves that also involves massaging. Don't drink any tea, coffee, Coke, any sugary drinks or anything, because that makes your blood move faster, your heart beat faster. And you never go to any place except for a good actual medical hospital. Okay. And I think we can now get to questions.
Perfect. So thank you so much, Jerry. Before we conclude the session, we had a lot of questions that came in, so we've kind of compiled a few. So I'll be just reading out to you.
Okay.
So the first common question that most of the people were asking is, how can we make if the snake is venomous or not? A. B is, how do venomous snakes kill their prey and how do non-venomous snakes kill their prey? C is there a thing called as mildly venomous? Because they read this term a lot in different books. So is there a thing called as mildly venomous? Yes or no? So there are these three questions, and then I'll get to a few people.
Okay, so the first question is, how can you tell if a snake is venomous or not? Well, in India, you have to know at least what kind of snake it is. So you might not need to know what particular viper it is, but if you know it's a viper, then you know it's venomous. You might see these various rules of thumb online, where they say if it's got a round pupil, then it's non-venomous. If it has an elliptical straight pupil, then it's venomous. That is only true in the UK, basically. And that's because the UK has 3.5 species of snakes. And I say 3.5 because the UK had 3 species, and then one more species came across from Europe, and just like the English cricket team, they just take anyone they can. So so they have 3.5 species, and only one of them has elliptical pupils, and that's the adder, which is the only venomous snake that they have. And venomous snakes kill their snakes with venom. The venom subdues the prey. Sometimes it kills the prey completely. Sometimes it just subdues it enough for it to be swallowed and killed. Non-venomous snakes, well, it depends. Most of them use constriction of some sort or the other to feed on their snakes. Some of them will just eat their prey live. I've seen a wolf snake that swallowed a gecko once, and the gecko was wriggling inside it, so it looked like the wolf snake was actually dancing to that song Tequila. So it was like, yeah. So it was kind of funny, and yeah, those were the three questions, right? From
And
this
the
thing.
third is the
mildly venomous.
Yes.
So mildly venomous is a term that people have come up with for snakes that are venomous that don't really do much damage to humans or don't do any damage to humans. But if you think about it from the snake's perspective, it actually is venomous. So it's either venomous or not. So there could be a harmful venomous or a dangerous venomous snake, and it could be a harmless venomous snake as well. But yeah, saying mildly venomous is sort of not quite accurate.
Perfect. Okay, so the second question is a lot of people were asking that they do see snakes around their house or their backyard. A, is it wise to approach them, pick it up? Okay. B, should we take them out or not? If they are venomous or not venomous? And C, they wanted to ask is, if just in case, a snake bites someone, and if there are no hospitals around, what should we do?
All right. So, firstly, never approach a snake. They are very interesting. You can watch them from a distance. But if you even if you know it's non-venomous, don't approach it because you will disturb it. If you're interested, my suggestion is to volunteer or visit places that actually do work with snakes and things like that, and spend a lot of time reading. There's a lot of material now, and learn more about them until you're a little older, and or you've built the skills for it. Secondly, if there are snakes in your compound and they're outside, even if it's a venomous snake, the thing is, it's not just that one snake that's around. So even if you remove it, you're not really solving any problem. But by removing it, what you might be doing is changing the balance of the place, and then other snakes might come in as well. So you want to just allow balance and be vigilant. If you see a snake, it's just an indicator that you need to be vigilant around the place. If you do remove them, and if you call a rescuer, ask them to not move them far away, because that almost certainly will kill them. And if it's a non-venomous snake, it's best for your own good not to move it at all, not to remove it, because if you remove one rat snake, say, from an area, it leaves an empty space, and there's a lot of prey that won't get eaten, and then there'll be a lot more prey breeding there, and then other snakes could come in. It could be other rat snakes, it could be a cobra, could be a Russell's viper. So if it's a rat snake, there is no danger. You might as well keep it there.
Perfect. And I think most of you got the answer.
Oh yeah, and if there's no hospital around,
yes.
You don't have to get to hospital immediately. As in, you don't have just 5 or 10 minutes to get to hospital. Doctors call it the golden hour, and most doctors feel that with the correct first aid, and if you get to a hospital within an hour, you have the best chance, and almost a really great chance of having no damage at all. So, and in most places in the city or in towns, you can able to get to a hospital within an hour in our country. So, but if you do have a lot of snakes around, it'll be good to call a few hospitals. And this could be a nice project that you do. Call a few hospitals around where you live, around your schools, and find out, who has antivenom, which ones of them treat snake bite regularly, and ideally go to a place that does treat snake bite regularly, because otherwise, in fact, a lot of the very fancy hospitals don't get many snake bite or any snake bite victims really. So it's better to go to second rung or missionary hospitals. So any hospitals that are run by a mutt or a religious institute of some or the other, because many of them get people referred from poorer and outskirts type of places to them, and they treat snakebite more often.
Perfect. Okay. And the third question is, okay, I've got a few people's attention because they've written the question 100 times. So one is, what is ectothermic? Okay, they are very confused because that word was there in your
Yes.
slide. And more to that is, do snakes have emotions and memories? This was a very beautiful question that a lot of people were asking.
Yeah.
Yes, these two questions.
Okay, so ectothermic is it means the same as cold-blooded. It means that the temperature of the animal is dictated by the temperature of an outside source, things around it, or so basically from the outside. Ectotherm. So ecto up from the outside, thermic is heat. And the other question was emotions. So that's actually a really, really interesting question. I don't know about emotions, and if they do have emotions, they're not quite like ours. But snakes do seem to. We have a couple of snakes here that seem to enjoy a few things. One of them seems to enjoy climbing one of the cobras that we have, and they're all kept in exactly the same kind of enclosure, and all of them have quite a large space and branches and all inside. And one of them just seems to always like being on a branch, and unlike any of the others. So there are also, within even a single clutch of eggs, you'll see different personalities of snakes. So some of them are more defensive. Some of them are a little, mildly mild mannered, I guess. And they're all so they do have personalities. Individuals who have personalities. Aragon's a very. I feel he's a thinker. So maybe I should have actually called him Gandalf, but he does seem to look at us and and I've worked with a lot of king cobras. He just seems to be more of a thinker.
Perfect.
But
yeah. And Jerry, the last question to you. So I think all the children over here took you very seriously when you said, you should go get a job and answer these questions. So they were asking if they want to get a job, they want to be into snake conservation or in the field of conservation. So how can they do it? Do you have any advices, anything that you have? And they were very curious about your journey. So if you can just tell your beginning, how you started with snakes. They're very curious to know about you. So yes, that's the last question. I promise.
Okay.
Can I just add one thing to that, Jerry? Just if you can end with, because I think there's a lot of information out there on if what we can do to support birds and to support butterflies and things, but it's a little bit there's no information on how can we support reptiles in our environments, because it's also can be a safety issue. So what are some actions we can take to just support our reptile friends?
Yeah. Okay. So I think if I'm really looking forward to many, many more of you joining the whole conservation front. And at the risk of sounding my age, you are really going to bear the brunt of how things are in the world now. There's a lot of we really need it, but there is hope, and I'm sure a lot of you will contribute to making the world a better place on all fronts. For a career in conservation, you could be doing anything and contribute to it. You could be anything from an economist to a fabricator, to an engineer, to a sports person, to a poet, anything. And your career could be focused on conservation, and you can bring value to conservation, not in some fluffy spread the message way only, but in actual activity. So, and especially in today's world, there are so many ways that you could find, what you could do. So, and how you could contribute to conservation in a very, very, in a very concerted and substantial and concrete manner. You don't only need to be a wildlife person or a botanist or an ecologist or an environmentalist to be a conservationist. In fact, some of the people who are contributing most to conservation are folks who are just farming sensibly or using much less or going zero carbon. These are this is really those are really the biggest contributors to conservation, and the only hope that we have. My journey, and I'm not sure if there are teachers listening. I apologize, teachers, but I dropped out of school and I started working with Romulus Whittaker, which was a childhood dream that I had, and I sort of went and I begged him to let me stay, and he let me stay, and then he gave me a job a few months later, and my job I think had the technical. I think my office could best have been described as slave. So I did everything and anything, and that's how I learned. But there weren't the opportunities back then that there are today. So don't drop out of school and find what really brings you meaning, whatever it is, and you can still be just be happy, be a happy human being, and you can, and I'm sure that alone will make the world a lot better. So yeah. Oh, and how you can support reptiles? Yes. See, I keep forgetting questions. That's me acting my age. Uh, uh, so, how you can support reptiles? So, there is the direct thing of how you can have your surroundings, and just having a nice garden somewhere. Everything will support some reptile or the other. Don't spray pesticides. Um, try to just leave the gecko that's around the light in your balcony. Leave it alone. All these things you can support reptiles around where you are, no matter where you are. But you can also support reptiles in the world at large, and you can do that. And the fundamental thing that we need to do is to not use so much. And it's been said for a long time, the whole reuse, reduce, and recycle, and all that stuff. And unfortunately, that's more true now than ever before. Yes, there's a lot of policy change, and governments have to do their bidding as well. Not their bidding, but their jobs. But I think what we really need to do is just do everything possible to not put such a strain on the planet. And if we can do that, things will get better.
Perfect. That's a lovely message, and thank you so much, Mr. Jerry Martin, for this wonderful session. I'm pretty sure the kids had a lot of fun. It was an insightful session. Guys, all of you children, can you show some support and love if you like the session with your emoticons? And you can just see you've been bombarded by a lot of emoticons here. So thank you so much, Jerry. I hope you had a great time interacting with these kids. Thank you so much, everyone. And just to let you know, our next webinar, as we wrap up this today's session, I want to remind everyone that this is just the beginning of our Wild Wisdom Gear Up series. We have many more exciting activities, webinars planned for you to help you prepare yourself for the Wild Wisdom Global Challenge 2024. Our next webinar is scheduled on 28th June by Dr. Nikhil Whittaker. So it's going to be pretty exciting. I hope you get to learn something from him. He's a research director of the facility of MCPT right now. So yes, stay tuned for 28, and thank you all for joining us today. Don't forget to reserve your spots for the upcoming session, as all the slots are limited and available on first come first basis. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, everyone. Hope you had a great day.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you, Jerry.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.